Namaste students. I'll bring you to the topic. We were discussing about biological evolution, and the most accepted concept about biological evolution was given by Charles Darwin, who says that it is by natural selection. And then we understood that the rate of this biological evolution is not the same for all organisms. For organisms having short lifespan, it is faster, like for example microorganisms. And for those who have a long lifespan, it will take a lot of time. Branching descent and natural selection are the two key concepts on which Darwin based his theory upon. We also looked into the idea of biological evolution by Lamarck. According to him, use and continuous use or continuous disuse will lead to the enlargement or loss of that body parts. And whatever we acquire in one generation, it will be transmitted to the next generation. So this is his concept. But as I was telling you all, it is not accepted now. Now the biologist was thinking, they were pondering about this aspect, whether evolution is a process or whether it is the end result of a process. Evolution is a process or end result of a process. When we look into the story of Earth, it can be considered as a process. Evolution can be considered as a process. But when we look into the story of life, it is actually the end result, or we can say that it is the end result of the process natural selection. So when we look into story of Earth, evolution is considered a process. And when we look into the story of life on Earth, it can be considered as end result of the process natural selection. Actually, this Darwin's theory of understanding about origin of species or evolution occurring by natural selection is greatly influenced, if you see very carefully, if you see, his concept about biological evolution is greatly influenced by the studies that was conducted by Sir Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus studies on population, okay, that greatly influenced Darwin's theory. According to Thomas Malthus, he studied on population. Every individual in a population, what is a population by the way? A group of individuals of a species makes up a population. He believes that every individual have immense biotic potential, means have the ability of overproduction. Okay, they can multiply to a great extent. This greatly influenced Darwin. Darwin's concept was influenced by the work of Thomas Malthus on population. So what was the idea? Every individual have immense biotic potential. Means they can overproduce. But we can see that if they overproduce, if they have to survive, there should be resources also equally available. But these resources are not unlimited, they are limited. Resources are limited. Therefore, to get those resources, these individuals will have to fight. There will be competition. So what did I tell? Resources are limited. So to get the resources, there will be struggle. Struggle for existence will be there. So it will lead to struggle for existence. Struggle for existence. And the struggle can be between members of the same species. When you call it as intraspecific struggle for existence. It can be between members of different species. When it is between members of different species, we call it as interspecific struggle for existence. Sometimes struggle can be with the environment. When it is with the environment, you call it as environmental struggle for existence. So struggle for existence can be of three types. It can be of three types. Intra means within a species. It can be inter, means between species, or it can be environmental, with the environment. And in the struggle for existence, Darwin believed that in any population, no two individuals are same. They will show definitely variations, okay? And those variations that will help the individual survive better in the struggle for existence will allow them to breed, produce more offsprings. So, in the struggle for existence, those individuals having variation that will help them to survive will leave more offsprings. So, Darwin called them fittest. By fittest, Darwin meant reproductive fitness. That is, those individuals which are capable of producing more offspring. Not the individual who is more intelligent or who is having more money. Those individuals which have variations that will help them to survive or to utilize the resources better and leave more offsprings. So he used the term in the struggle for existence, survival of fittest. And by fitness, Darwin meant reproductive fitness. And in the long run, what will happen? Nature will select or it will favor those individuals which are having such variations. So the variations will accumulate, and in the long run, it will lead to the development of a new species. Natural selection. Lead to natural selection. Leading to origin of new species. So I told Darwin's theory of the origin of new species by natural selection was greatly influenced by the work on population by Sir Thomas Malthus, who believed that every individual in a population have immense biotic potential or to overproduce. Okay? And when they overproduce and more individuals are produced, they should have that much amount of resource to survive. But naturally, if you look at, resources are limited. Therefore, only those individuals having variation which can utilize those resources will be able to survive. They have to struggle with other individuals, other organisms. It may be of their own species or of different species, or maybe with the environment. So, there will be struggle. This is called struggle for existence. Struggle for existence can be intra-specific struggle for existence, interspecific struggle for existence, or environmental struggle for existence. And in this, Darwin believed that in a population there will be individuals showing different variations, and those variations which will help the individual survive and utilize the resources better, they will survive, survival of the fittest, and leave more offsprings, reproductive fitness. And in the long run, nature will start selecting those individuals having better variations, and it will natural selection, and in the long run it will lead to the development of new species. So, due to the accumulation of these variations. So, how are these variations developing? What is the method of development of this variation, and how is the origin of species occurring? Yes children, we are going to discuss about mechanism of evolution. The development of variations and process of origin of new species. It was during this time that Gregor Mendel, whenever we think about Gregor Mendel, what comes to our mind is the genetic experiments he has conducted. You have studied about it in Principles of Inheritance. So, Gregor Mendel had proposed that every phenotype, every character is governed by some factors. Now, we know that these factors are nothing but genes, but at that time he did not know, and he had proposed that certain factors were governing the expression of these characters, factors. So, when Darwin was proposing this, it was roughly during this time only that Gregor Mendel had proposed about this, but Darwin did not attach any importance to it. Okay? He did not give any importance. Roughly in the first decade of the 20th century, that was when the Hugo de Vries, he was doing an experiment on a plant by name Oenothera lamarckiana. Okay? Its common name is evening primrose. Okay? So, during that time he did the experiment on this, and he understood that spontaneously in this Oenothera lamarckiana or evening primrose, a new character developed in one generation, and it was transmitted to the next generation. He called this as mutation. His theory of mechanism of evolution is theory of mutation. He believed that evolution will occur by mutation. That is the theory of mutation that he has proposed, and the experiment material was evening primrose. Scientific name you do not have to know. Evening primrose, if you know, it is fine. Gregor Mendel proposed about factors controlling phenotype. But I told you Darwin did not attach any importance. Okay? So during that time, Hugo de Vries, he proposed theory of mutation. Mutation is nothing but sudden large heritable change occurring to genetic material. So I would just remove this heritable, not required. Sudden large change occurring to genetic material. So that is his theory. And what was his experiment material? It was evening primrose. Evening primrose. He was doing experiment on it and he found that mutation is the cause for evolution. So according to him, evolution is random, directionless, quick and jerky process because it is by mutation. Okay? It is not continuous, it is random and suddenly it appears. So evolution is quick and jerky process. And it does not have direction. That's his concept, Hugo de Vries' concept. So what was his concept? His concept was it is random. Mutation is random. Therefore, evolution is quick and jerky process and it is directionless. No direction. This is actually opposite to what Darwin believed. Darwin believed that evolution is by gradual accumulation of variation. Okay? So according to Darwin, evolution or the mechanism of evolution is gradual and it is directional, slow. According to Darwin, mechanism is it is by gradual accumulation of variation. So, slow and directional. So that was the difference between Hugo de Vries' idea about mechanism of evolution and Darwin's idea about mechanism of evolution. So Darwin believed in gradual evolution, whereas Hugo de Vries believed in mutation. Single step large mutation is called as saltation. Okay? So single step large mutation is called saltation. This is one mark question. What is meant by saltation? Then you have to write single step large mutation. And Hugo de Vries believed in it. His experiment material was evening primrose or Enothera lamakiana, scientific name. And he believed it is random, directionless, quick and jerky process. Slowly, studies were conducted on population genetics by two scientists, Hardy and Weinberg. Their study on population genetics gave the correct idea or the most accepted idea about mechanism of evolution. Godfrey G.H. Hardy. He was a British mathematician. And William Weinberg. He was a German physicist. They made a study on population genetics. they found that in a population, so what is a population you consider? See, there are so many individuals. So a group of individuals of a species is called population. This is a population, okay? And if you assume this is a population, they believe that each individual will be having the entire set of genes, isn't it? The sum total of genes of each and every individual in this population, they called it as gene pool. I repeat, the sum total of all the genes of every individual in a population is called gene pool. And in this gene pool, each gene if you take, it will be having a frequency with which it will occur. So, frequency of individual gene in this gene pool is called gene frequency. The frequency of individual gene. And they believe that in a generation, the sum total of the frequency of all the alleles of a gene will come to equilibrium. Now, what's the meaning of allele? Again, I'll take you to principles of inheritance where you studied that alternative form of a gene is called as allele. So, any gene if you take, there will be one or two or many alternative alleles. They are called as alternative forms, you call them as alleles. So, what did they understand when they made a study on population genetics? They understood that the sum total of gene frequency of all alleles of a gene in the population will come to equilibrium, and this is called genetic equilibrium. Okay? Sum total of gene frequency of all alleles of a gene will be equal to 1. It is called genetic equilibrium. So, what is genetic equilibrium? According to Hardy and Weinberg, in a generation, in a population, the sum total of gene frequency of all alleles of a gene will be equal to 1, or it will come to equilibrium. This is called as genetic equilibrium. In honor of their contribution, it is also called Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. They try to explain by the giving geometric equation. So, let us see that geometric equation. So, we will see that. Consider one gene. In a population, okay? In a population, I told you, consider this population, consider one gene. Let us represent it by alphabet A. Let it have two alternative alleles, its alleles. Let it be capital A and small a. Let the frequency of A be equal to P and frequency of small a be equal to Q. So, according to them, in one generation, frequency, sum total of the frequency of all alleles of a gene will be equal to 1. So, in one generation, P plus Q will be equal to 1. So, if there is random mating, then the probability is different types of individuals with having capital A and capital A in the two chromosomes, homologous chromosomes on a single locus. Locus is a point on the chromosome where the gene will be. So some individuals will have this, some individuals will have like this, some individuals will have like this. So what will be the frequency of this one? The frequency will be equal to P into P, that is equal to P square. And what will be the frequency of this? It will be equal to 2 into P into Q, 2PQ. And this will be equal to Q into Q, that is equal to Q square. So this will be the probability in the next generation. So sum total will be equal to P square plus 2PQ plus Q square. And this is nothing but the expansion of P plus Q the whole square. So thereby they explained the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium or genetic equilibrium. In a generation, the frequency of all the alleles of a gene will come to equilibrium, or the sum total of it will be equal to 1. And it will remain like that, it will remain like that generation after generation, unless it is altered by factors that can bring about change in gene frequency. This equilibrium, it will remain like that generation after generation. Unless it is altered by, factors that brings change in gene frequency. So what are these factors that can bring about change in gene frequency? There are 5 factors that can bring about change in gene frequencies. So we are going to discuss the factors. I told you 5 factors are there. First one is gene flow. Second one is genetic drift. Third one is mutation. Fourth one is genetic recombination. And the fifth one is natural selection. So gene flow. What is this? You consider 2 population, okay? 2 population of one species, A and B. Let it be A and B, okay? Suppose this many individuals, they move from here to B. So what will happen is that much gene frequency becomes less here, it becomes added here. If this occurs continuously for some time, it will lead to flow of genes variation. Anything that can bring about change in gene frequency will lead to evolution. So when the genes flow like this, not once, if it occurs many times, it will definitely lead to change in gene frequency. Okay, so if some individuals move from one population to other, and if it continues, it can lead to change in gene frequency, and this will lead to evolution. So this moving is called as gene flow. So, I hope you understood for the first factor, gene flow. It is nothing but the movement of group of individuals from one population to another population of the same species, okay, A and B. So, here there will be reduction in gene frequency, here it will be added on. If it continues, it will lead to change in gene frequency. We will discuss about the second one, that is called as genetic drift. A scientist by name Sewall-Wright made a study on it. So, it is also called Sewall-Wright effect. Genetic, second one is genetic drift. I told you Sewall-Wright made a study on it. Now, what is genetic drift? It is nothing but change in gene frequency occurring purely by chance. Okay? If change in gene frequency occurs purely by chance, this is how you define. Any of these factors can be asked as 1 mark question, or the entire thing can be asked as a 5 mark question. Very important. Definition of Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium also very important. So, change in gene frequency purely by chance. For you to understand, I will give you an example. You consider a population of parrots. Let there be 100 parrots. In that, let us assume that 95 were green feathered and remaining 5 blue feathered. So, some gene is determining that character, isn't it? Suppose a pandemic struck this population. It struck the population. Okay, many of the green feathered died, but all the blue feathered also died. So, what happened is that later on only green feathered are there. So, here what has happened, the blue feathered gene got completely lost. It is not because that the gene determining green feather is in any way superior to the gene that is determining blue feather. Purely due to chance, it became completely lost. There was a drastic change in gene frequency, and it is by chance. So, who studied this? Sewall-Wright. So, it is also called as Sewall-Wright effect. He believes that such changes are by chance is taking place in every population. Some population are very big, some population are small. So, the effect of this, that change in gene frequency by chance, more evident or prominent in small population rather than big population. So, that is called as genetic drift. So, suppose the change in gene frequency, suppose it is drastic, it can lead to the development of a new species. So, in that you can see that in that case the original population you can call as founder, and the effect can be called as founder effect. If it is drastic, that is change in the frequency, it can lead to the development of new species, and in that case original population is called as founder, and effect is founder effect. Founder effect. If the change in the gene frequency is drastic, new species, it can look drastically different from the original species. So, in that case the original species can be called as founder and the effect is called as founder effect. Now, we move on to the next factor, and that is mutation. I have already written the definition, so I am not going to repeat it. Mutation is sudden large change occurring to the genetic material. it will definitely lead to change in gene frequency. Okay? A sudden large change to genetic material. We know that it is random. It can be, sometimes it can be useful, it can be harmful, it can be, it may not have any drastic effect also. Sometimes it can be fatal too, it can be neutral. Different types of mutations are there. Definitely it will lead to change in gene frequency. So this is another factor, third factor. Next one we are going to discuss, the fourth one is genetic recombination. You have studied about genetic recombination that is occurring during packaging stage. During this, homologous chromosome will come and lie, and the non-sister chromatids of homologous chromosome will overlap. What are these non-sister chromatids? These are sister chromatids of this chromosome, and these are also sister chromatids. These are non-sister chromatids. So they will overlap. Like this. And what will happen? A cut will occur and they will exchange the segments. Okay? So this is what is called as genetic recombination. And this will definitely lead to change in gene frequency. So that is the fourth factor, because the segment of the chromosome is cut and exchanged. So whatever genes are here will be transferred to the other one, and whatever genes that one is having, this one will get. So change in gene frequency. Last factor is natural selection. Nature, we have already studied about it for a long time now. Nature will definitely select those variations that will be allowing the individuals to survive better. Nature will be selecting the fittest, which will have a genetic makeup which will be inherited. So that is what is called as natural selection. So this natural selection can be of three different types. Okay, we can depict in the form of a graph. If you consider like this, a graph like this, if this is the phenotype, and this is the number of individuals with phenotype, this is how nature will be influencing it. So this is the phenotype that is selected by phenotype selected by nature. So I told you natural selection can be three types. Sometimes nature can select the individuals that is having intermediate phenotype rather than the two extremes. These are all the phenotypes. You imagine height. Okay? Individuals very short, very tall, and which is having intermediate height. Just for you to understand an example. So sometimes nature may feel that individuals with intermediate phenotype is better to survive in the conditions. So it may select only those. So what will happen? The peak will become narrower and steeper. Like this, it can be narrower. Intermediate phenotype is selected. So the curve, it becomes narrower and steeper. Narrow and steeper. This type of selection is called as, it's called stabilizing selection. It's called stabilizing selection. Sometimes nature may feel that one extreme phenotype is much better, so it may select that. So you can see that it will be shifted towards one side. Okay? So sometimes it will be like that. Then you will understand. So here it is. See, it is shifted. So the peak is shifted towards one side. So individuals of that particular phenotype is selected. Then you call it as directional selection. You call it as directional selection. So this is the second type of selection that is done by nature. Sometimes nature may feel that nature may not select the intermediate phenotype at all, and it will select phenotype on either extremity. Then there will be two peaks. Then you call that as disruptional selection. So sometimes the selection may be like this. Like this. Then you call it as intermediate phenotype is not selected at all, whereas the two other extremes phenotypes are selected. So you call it as disruptional selection. So these are the three different types of natural selection. Natural selection is the fifth factor that can bring about, by its influence, it can bring about change in gene frequency. And change in gene frequency leads to evolution. And the three types of selection is nothing but stabilizing, directional, disruptional. When nature selects the individuals with intermediate phenotype more, so that the peak becomes narrower and steeper, you call it as stabilizing selection. When it do not select the intermediate phenotype or one extremity, but selects only one particular extremity, any one extremity, it can be that side or it can be this side, directional selection. Sometimes you can see that it will not select the intermediate phenotype at all, but selects the phenotypes on either extremity. Disruptional selection. All this can bring about change in gene frequency. That whichever phenotype it is selecting, that gene is getting selected. So there is change in gene frequency. So all these can lead to change in gene frequency, and this is what Hardy and Weinberg says, any factor that can bring about change in gene frequency can lead to evolution. Unless or until such factors influence on a population, the frequency, sum total of the frequency of all the alleles of a gene will remain in equilibrium. Sum total of it will be equal to 1. This is Hardy-Weinberg law, and this is the most accepted mechanism of evolution.